Thank you, everyone, for joining. And as always, Chris Goettl, I'm co-hosting with Todd Shell, and we are going to bring you the best and most up-to-date information we possibly can about what exactly is going on this Patch Tuesday. So yesterday, there was a big release from Microsoft, of course. We had 10 bulletins that we're going to be focusing on today. 7 of those were rated as critical, 3 as important. A total of 130 new CVEs were resolved in this release, and 9 CVEs that were re-release is not the correct word, but basically an updated release. Most of these are either informational or expanding the scope of what they affect. So an example of that is, oh, hey, this CVE released last year, late in the year. When a new edition of that product comes out, like the OS, like when 2023 H1 released, suddenly there's a number of previous CVEs that got updated to say, oh yes, this also affects that. So make sure you're up to the latest to make sure that that CVE gets resolved. So a lot of times those updated CVEs are expanding or adding to the information about them. There's also 3 advisories this month, a couple of which we're going to talk about in more depth. And there's a number of confirmed zero-day exploits. So quite a bit of additional risk there that you're going to want to be aware of. And of course, we've got the next stage of both the NetLogon and Kerberos changes from the 2022 CVEs. We're going to talk about what the next stage for each of those is and try to answer any questions there for everyone. So that is going to be the lineup for today, starting off with some of the headline news around security issues going on. First one that we're going to cover is Apple issued an urgent patch for a zero-day flaw, and the targeting of that was affecting iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and Safari. And then they quickly went and pulled it, and we're going to talk about why here. So for those of you who are new to the On24 platform, I'm about to share my screen. When I do that, you're going to see multiple screens become available on your screen there. But you have the ability to resize that. So we're going to actually go over and pay more attention to the shared screen and some of the news articles. For those of you who want to get access to these articles and links that we're going to be talking about, there is also a tray for a bunch of downloadable content in there. You can go and get access to the PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation we're going through right now. This month, you're also going to see a number of additional assets. There's some recent surveys, other things in there, some updated information that may be interesting for you. So feel free to peruse. The PDF is the thing you definitely want. The other ones are there for your consuming pleasure if there's a topic that looks interesting for you there. But go ahead and grab that PDF if you want to grab any of the URLs we're about to cover. So the first one, our Apple zero-day issue. This is a vulnerability in WebKit that is actively being exploited. Apple has confirmed issues. They're aware of reports that this is being actively exploited. That is CVE 2023-37450. So it is affecting iOS and iPad versions 16.5.1 and earlier, macOS Ventura 13.4.1, macOS Big Sur, and macOS Monterey. They addressed 10 zero-day vulnerabilities in the software since the start of 2023. And this is just the latest of those. Now, the more important part here is this had some very negative impacts. So the next link that we're talking about is Apple had to go and quickly pull the rapid release of this. So if you look down a little bit, some reports from Mac Rumors is talking about the fact that it was the WebKit code changes were basically having a lot of negative impacts on several applications. That included very popular applications like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Zoom. I mean, that lineup there alone pretty much killed this update and made it so that they had to roll back. So there is a remove option available there. Anyone who has installed that, you can go and remove the rapid security response, the security response update, and then you will get a confirmation that it has been removed. So this is showing a couple of screenshots of what that experience looks like on the iOS devices. But if you had anybody who did that, that removal option is there and available. And the reason why they may want to remove that is, again, because of a lot of very common applications being impacted by that WebKit update. So not sure when Apple's going to be re-releasing this. No word on that yet. And for those of you who know Apple well, you know that they don't talk about anything until it's like, days old and, it's already out there, and then they'll acknowledge it. But right now they've pulled the patch and they're working on getting it fixed. So that is the news on the Apple front. The next one that we want to talk about, so this is one of the CVEs from Microsoft that is being actively exploited. The biggest thing to keep in mind here is this CVE does not currently have a patch. It is affecting Windows and Office products, but does not have, it's not part of the OS and Office updates this month yet. Microsoft stated in their documentation that they're still working on this, but there is mitigations available to make it to mitigate the risk right now. So the fact that they actually are stating that they're working to address the vulnerability, they pointed out that it can be fixed by an out of band patch that could be released before August Patch Tuesday. So keep an eye out for a potential out of band here between now and August, but most likely fixed by August at the latest. In the meantime, Microsoft is recommending some additional mitigation. There is more information about that, but the CVE is 2023-36884. There is this additional storm post. So they basically have these, there's multiple terms for it, but ROMCOM or storm, it's basically a notification system to talk about security implications of a certain type of attack. So Microsoft has a blog post article about this. It goes into a lot more detail about detecting, basically stepping up, functionality around making sure that you've got your protection in place and working correctly. The different tools that you might be using, looking for ransomware activity. It's got a variety of information about this one. I believe they have some samples of some of the things that are examples of how they might take advantage of this. And then they give some recommendations down here towards the bottom. Microsoft's recommendations are obviously Microsoft centric. So it's talking about Defender antivirus and Defender for endpoints, EDR capabilities. But if you look at the guidance here, make sure that if you're using another EDR solution or something else to protect, just try to match what their guidance is for that. We do have one question coming in here from Brandon. Are you aware of any impact for enabling the registry key? So that's kind of the next thing that I wanted to touch on here is the actual mitigation for this is enabling a registry key and then basically enabling a number of D-word reg values. I'll scroll in a little bit more here to show you that. But basically, you're creating a rule for each of the different Office applications that are affected by this. And what's happening is it's basically saying, no, none of these applications are allowed to create a child process while this key is in place. So Brandon, to that question, it's going to be situational. If you have any of these applications where you open a file and that file would start a sub-process, there's a possibility that you will have some negative impacts functionality-wise in there. So like a standard Word document, not an issue. An Excel spreadsheet with some complex macros and some other magic going on behind the scenes that would spawn a child process to do some additional processing, absolutely potentially impacted by putting this registry key in place. So your power users in certain groups, like finance especially, could be negatively impacted by turning on this mitigation. But right now, this is all we got until the out of band or August patch resolves this. So each of you are going to have to determine organizationally the risk of, either letting this run and having your EDR or other solutions catch this, maybe giving people a heightened level of awareness around any documents coming in and being cautious of opening anything that's even unexpected. Basically trust or verify, or not even trust but verify and then still scrutinize. Microsoft doesn't normally go to these levels unless there's a lot of activity around something. So there is a risk here. It's actively being exploited. Likely there's enough activity here that Microsoft is in the works on potentially releasing an out of band, which they don't typically do. So my guidance would be either, heightened level of awareness and, keep a closer eye on EDR until we get the patch in place, or put the mitigation in place and, protect yourselves a little bit more. So let's see. A lot of questions just came in around that one. So Brandon, I think I answered your question there. Chris had a question. If I have an ASR configuration, will this registry key need to be added, or will the ASR rule block this? I don't think that the ASR rules are going to block this. I think this one's additional beyond that. I did not see any reference in there saying if you're using ASRs, you don't have to worry about this. If it is in there somewhere, I didn't dig deep enough to find that, Chris. So I would say expect that you're going to have to put this key in place. Microsoft may have something deeper in there than what I was reading down to by that point, but I didn't see anything specific. So EDR, obviously, endpoint detection and response. That'll be like if you're running Microsoft for EDR, that's your Defender, additional endpoint, security features, or CrowdStrike or SentinelOne, or the EDR capabilities from those types of solutions. Brandon, they didn't specify outside of what they have in this additional Storm document. That's the most that Microsoft expanded for any type of indicators or other information to look for to see if there's a compromise in your environment. I haven't looked beyond that to see if there's other open source or additional solutions that have it. Might be something that, if you're, depending on who your vendor is, check with them and see if they have something specific around that you can also use. I believe this one was detected by multiple endpoint protection vendors. So there's a chance that many of them have some samples of things to look for pattern-wise to identify if anything's going on. And then I think we got one more here on this from James for the Office patch issue. The security blog says MS apps 2302 and later are protected. So let me go over to the security feature bypass. Here we go. Here's the specific CVE page. This vulnerability affects Office and Windows HTML. So this is where things get a little bit complex. This is not just Microsoft Office. That article talked about Office, but they didn't talk about the whole complexity of this. They've got the details of the registry key and the word values that you need to put in there. Here's the link to that blog entry, that Storm article that I mentioned. If you go down to the list of affected operating systems, you see that it affects all of the Windows OSs, pretty much, and the Office versions as well. So if we got at least up to 22H2, so it looks like the very latest might be the only ones that are not affected by this. But that's your source of truth for what's affected by this is this list here. And it is quite broad. The reason for that is because of the fact that it's in the HTML level. So that's a shared component on the Windows platform and across the Office platform. And that's why it affects such a wide variety. We're going to talk about one more CVE that's doing that, and also gets into the scripting engine level, which is why it affects all the way back to like the IE cumulative, which we'll talk about in a little bit here as well. We'll come back to that though. So in this case though, so Jason, if you need that, the links to anything we're sharing there, all of that is in the PDF version that's available to download out of your tray in On24. Okay, moving along because we got a lot of ground to cover. Next topic, Oracle. The critical patch update is going to be releasing next Tuesday, so July 18th. Expect all the Oracle applications, including Java, are going to be getting updates next week. And also, when Java updates, there will be a cascading effect. So if you're using any of the Java alternative frameworks, Corretto, OpenJDK, those will all start to get updates as well. Basically, it starts a domino effect. So through the course of the rest of July and into early August, expect that there will be a lot of Oracle updates and Java framework updates across the board. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. All right. That's the top news. Now we're going to start to get into the Microsoft-specific advisories and CVEs. The first one here is Advisory 230001. This is the guidance on Microsoft signed drivers being used maliciously. I've included a couple of links there. The second link, the notice of additions to the driver STL revocation list, is actually a link inside of that advisory that we're looking at here as well. But just to cover the advisory specifically, Microsoft is aware of some Microsoft Partner Center accounts that were basically compromised and engaged in submitting malicious drivers to obtain a Microsoft signature. Microsoft identified those and shut those accounts down quickly. They identified any of the drivers that were created by that, and they added those to the revocation list. So if you want more details about what was added to that driver STL list, that's this support article right here. We'll have the additional information about that. But this is the recommended actions here. If you are, you should get to the latest updates. So the latest OS updates this month. Make sure your antivirus is up to date and your endpoint protection is up to date. If you are using Microsoft Defender, it also is updating its signatures to detect and block these invalid drivers. So Microsoft Defender version and newer that you want to look for there if you're running Defender. Otherwise, make sure that you get the latest updates so that you're getting that driver revocation list. So this one should be mostly a awareness thing. Get up to date so you're doing that. Or, if you're not going to be deploying the latest updates this month, there might be some additional support information you have to dig through there to figure out how to make sure you get the latest driver revocation list if you're not going to go to the latest OS update right away. So more information on that. Updates will be made to the recommended drivers list here. You've got a link for that. My best recommendation here is, spend a little bit of time if you're not using Defender and make sure you know how to ensure that you're getting that updated driver revocation list. That's going to be your best source of defense. All right. And then this is the article that talks about that driver revocation list. Not very much in there. It just talks a little bit about what the driver STL does, more or less. So next article is Microsoft's guidance for addressing security feature bypass in Trend Micro EFI modules. For those of you running Trend Micro EFI, this is an article you're going to want to check out. We're not going to spend too much time on that one here, but basically there's a CVE being addressed by this article. It's not something that's just a regular update. It's got some recommended actions here. Oh, okay. They are just saying run the latest Windows security updates. Secure boot, new UEFI, PC ecosystem. UEFI secure boot is an anti-rootkit feature that defends against the boot process from untrusted code execution. Got it. Okay. So maybe this is just a no action taken besides getting up to the latest. I thought they had some additional guidance in there, but they don't appear to. Their recommended action is get up to the latest. So for those of you running Trend Micro EFI, just make sure that that's part of your urgency for getting updated this month. Okay. Kerberos and NetLogon. We talked about these a few times over the last 7-8 months now. This is dating back to 2 CVEs that released in 2022. The first one, Windows Kerberos Elevation of Privilege Vulnerability, CVE 2022-37967. This was basically a way to bypass security features in Kerberos and NetLogon. Now, there's 2 CVEs, but basically it's bypassing features in those that allow the attacker to do bad things. So what they had to do was actually to update, in this case, the cryptographic protocol vulnerabilities in Windows Kerberos. They had to update Kerberos to basically do these PAC signature validations to avoid the privilege escalation. So Microsoft has released an article, how to manage Kerberos and NetLogon changes relating to this update. If you drill into that additional article and scroll down, you'll see the history of what's been done so far. November 8th, 22, they did the initial deployment. We had a December update. That was the second deployment phase, third deployment phase. There was a bunch of logging, auditing, other things there. We're all the way down here in July now. So this month, what you need to know is Microsoft is stepping up enforcement now. This is the initial enforcement phase. They removed the ability to set a lower value of that, and they put the default up to a level 3, which is to enforce the PAC signature validation. So this enforcement mode is in effect by default. Until October, you have the ability to override by administrator setting with an explicit audit setting. So I'm assuming that's the value of 2, but basically the default setting will be 3, which is enforce that PAC signature validation. If you aren't ready to do that, then you need to go and specifically edit that to do the audit specific setting. In October, they're going to remove that audit mode, and everything will be being enforced from the October release on. So there's the big risk of this is especially around third-party systems that your Windows systems may be interacting with. If you turned on the logging for this and were watching the events that were coming out of that, you may have seen some of those third-party systems come up in those logs as not being compliant with that PAC signature validation. Microsoft's guidance is, reach out to your OEM and software vendors for those systems that are affected, and basically get the information you need from them to make sure that they're being compliant with this. It may be an update, configuration change, something along those lines, a patch of some sort that you need to apply to third-party systems to make them compliant with this change. So make sure that you've done that. If you have, then stepping up to enforcement mode should be a non-issue. If you haven't taken a look at those audit logs to make sure things are clean, then you might be in for a surprise this month when enforcement goes to default mode. So be aware of that and be prepared to set that to audit mode if you're not running a clean house right now. Yeah. So that is the Kerberos change. Again, enforcement by default. You have ability to override and do audit mode until October. Now, NetLogon, RPC sealing. This is the other vulnerability, also released originally in 2022 and had a step up kind of experience over the past 7-8 months here. So in July, the difference here is this is going to full enforcement mode. The require sealing, so RPC sealing was the new feature enhancement that they did to get around this feature bypass, the security feature bypass here. and they've now removed the ability to not enforce. Now it's required. After you deploy the July update, RPC sealing is required for net logon. So again, there's auditing that they've had in place. If you haven't gone in and looked at that, make sure that you do so. Again, there's the potential impact that if you have third-party systems that are not compliant with that RPC sealing, that those could be impacted. They had a similar note in here about basically look at the audit logs, figure out what systems are not compliant, follow up with those OEM and software vendors to figure out how to get their systems compliant. But July's update, full enforcement mode, no ability to disable or go into compatibility mode anymore. So that is the changes for Kerberos and net logon. Now we're going to start to talk about the new CVEs that were resolved this month. The first one is actually a reissue of a CVE that released back in May. So May 9th, 2023, this first came out. It's a secure boot security feature bypass. Microsoft said severity was important. The CVSS score was a 6.7, but there is confirmed exploits in the wild, and the code, it's got functional exploit code available publicly. So everybody gets access to it. Somebody's got a sample out there that allows them to basically get the full, details of how to exploit this. So that is the risk on this one. Microsoft has fixed the issue already. What the change is this month was they were basically saying, let's see, I got to go down further. Here we go. To comprehensively address this vulnerability, Microsoft has released the July 2023 security updates for all affected versions of Microsoft Windows. So basically, the initial release affected not everything. They've expanded that now to, basically say more of the OSs were affected than initially understood. And the latest OS updates this month will cover everything. So make sure to look at, the list goes all the way back to the 2008 server level and covers everything up to, some of the more recent, looks like 21H2 for Windows 11 and Windows 10 editions. Oh, no, so there's the 22s. So 22H2 was affected as well. So pretty much everything was affected by that one. That was their note on this one. It's just it expanded the applicability. Next one is around the Office and Windows HTML. We talked about this one already. This is our mitigation only CVE right now. So again, this is something where if you are running pretty much any of the Windows and Office editions, this is something that is exploitable. There's no fix for it yet with a software update. So any of these editions, they've basically got the fix is to put mitigation in place to make it so that any of these applications cannot spawn a child process. If it does, then it'll be blocked if you've got this registry key in place. So that is the recommendation right now, is to basically run that mitigation and wait for an out of band or the August update at most likely at latest to resolve this one. Next one is the Microsoft Windows MS HTML platform elevation of privilege vulnerability. So this one is for those of you running on older OSs. The major thing to note here is this will actually require an IE cumulative update if you're doing the security only updates. So this vulnerability is an elevation of privilege, 7.8 CVSS score. Microsoft rated it as important, but it is confirmed in exploits in the wild. So in this case, Microsoft is saying that this is there's reports of exploitation. The attacker could use a variety of email and web-based attack scenarios to target a user. The code for this is in that MS HTML platform level. So this is used by the legacy IE and Microsoft Edge browsers. which are still on the older 2008 and 2012 systems. So if you're seeing notes about IE cumulative, no, IE 11 is not back. What they had to do, though, was because the scripting engine is used, so MS-HTML and Edge HTML are used in a variety of the platform level code. And that scripting engine level is what's bringing it across that. So IE cumulative is updated this month specifically to update that shared code. If you're running on the older OSs and you're doing the security only update track, for those of you who are doing it, you should know that you're doing it. If you're not doing it, you're just on the cumulative updates. Don't worry about this because you're getting it automatically in that cumulative update. Cumulative has it included, security only. You have to push 2 updates this month to cover this vulnerability, the security only and the IE cumulative. All right, next we have a security feature bypass in Windows Smart Screen. This one also rated as important, a little bit higher CVSS score. Code is functional for this one and has not been disclosed, but definitely they've got confirmed cases of exploitation here. It is exploitable over the network, low complexity. Privileges to exploit this are negligible. They really don't need any high privilege levels or even low privilege levels to exploit this one. And all they need is a user to click on a specially crafted URL to compromise them. So what would happen then is they would be able to bypass the open file security warning prompt. Like, hey, you're clicking on something that's from a source that you may not trust. Do you really want to do this kind of thing? If they bypass that, the user doesn't get any warning. They open the file, and now that file that was opened could be loaded with some additional payload. It could exploit another vulnerability. This type of vulnerability is going to be used in an attack chain to, in conjunction with, possibly 2, 3, 4 CVEs being exploited all in a chain to get to the level of control that they need. But it is definitely a way to bypass the security features meant to protect the system. And it does affect quite a variety of the Windows OSs from the oldest up to the latest 22H2s. So definitely another one to put urgency on this month's OS updates. Next, we have the Microsoft Outlook security feature bypass. This is affecting Microsoft 365 apps for Enterprise, Outlook 2013, 2016, Office 2019, and the Office LTSC 2022. Important CV or severity, 8.8 on the CVSS scoring. Again, attack vector is over the network, low complexity, privileges required, negligible. Functional code is available for this. They've confirmed exploitation in the wild. Again, specially crafted URL. They just have to convince a user to click on it. I think we all know that that's a statistical challenge, not really anything more. So there's a lot of risk in not pushing the OS and Outlook updates this month. So make sure to get those in place. Last one, and then we'll pass over to Todd here pretty quick to get started on the rest of the details. Sorry, there's a huge pile of stuff from Microsoft this month. Windows error reporting, service elevation of privilege vulnerability. Important, 7.8 CVSS score. This one is the attacker needs to be local. There is a low-level privilege requirement on this. There's reports of exploitation on this, but it's not widespread or anything yet. Usually the thing to look for there is, yes, it's confirmed exploited. The code maturity is unproven, meaning Microsoft doesn't have a fully working sample of exactly how to exploit this, but they're fixing what they believe is going to be the flaw there. So this is an official fix. They have confirmed the reports and the fix in this case. If an attacker successfully exploits this, they could gain administrator privileges on the system. The attacker must have local access to the target machine, and a user must be able to create folders and performance traces on the machine. Now, reality is a lot of organizations, and this may not apply to all of you, but a lot of organizations have had to over-privilege users as we went to remote work heavily. So if you're running most users as a local admin, this is not going to be a huge bar for them. So again, it's a low level of privileges required to do this, and it will give them full administrative privileges on the box if they compromise it. And again, all the way back to the older server editions up to the latest, Windows 22H2 editions. So moral of the story this month is get your OS updates out, get your Office updates out. That's going to remove the majority of your risk. We do have that one mitigation only vulnerability that's actively being exploited right now. That one's a heightened level of awareness. Microsoft is recommending mitigation, which they don't often strongly do, but they're also talking out of band, which they really don't often do. So do have a conversation about that and determine if your organization is going to either put the mitigation in place or make sure that your EDR is tuned to look for behaviors in that list of applications like this, or heightened level of awareness for users, notify them that any documents you're receiving of these types, make sure to triple scrutinize anything coming in to make sure that it's from a source that you trust. On that note, Todd's going to talk about this a little bit later, but we do have the 2012 R2 end of life coming in October. Microsoft is going to be implementing some new logging that's going to tell you all about it. So your 2012 server will start to scream at you that end of life is coming. And then on our Windows 10 and 11 lifecycle, the next that we have here is, 21H2 for Windows Home and Pro editions. So any of you running on the Pro licensing, that's the next version to reach an end of life for a branch. So keep an eye out for that. On that note, Todd, handing over to you.
Wow, that was a lot of material, Chris. Thanks.
Yep.
So let's talk briefly about the bulletins that came out this month. We saw that Mozilla released a couple of Firefox updates. This one was kind of interesting because they just reported one vulnerability on the security advisory page, which was rated as important, but yet they still rated it high, which we generally will push up to a critical rating there. Interestingly enough, there must be something going on under the covers that they're rating this high. So definitely take a look at Firefox. They also are going to spin off the Firefox ESR version. Oh, I didn't update that version. Sorry, there's a version mistake there. It is actually the same one as the previous one. Interestingly enough, they did release both of these under 2023-26, so under the same advisory this month. Windows 11, we had our usual update, massive number of vulnerabilities addressed. As you can imagine, since Chris went through a lot of the ones that are 0 days, there are a lot more out there. 84 vulnerabilities that were addressed this month. We did see the 21H2 release as well as the 22H2 update. Pay special attention to the 22H2 version. If you go in and look at the KB, there's a large number of new features and enhancements that were released. This is part of the moment release schedule that they do with all these, I'll say minor but smaller feature releases, incremental that they're doing. But the KB article is huge, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's happening with this particular release, so pay attention to that one. Again, 84 vulnerabilities this month, large number. I did highlight in one in red the ones that Chris talked about earlier, going into quite a bit of detail about all of those. As far as known issues go, they're still carrying forward some of the same known issues. This application failure around third-party customization apps, be aware of that one. It's been on the board for, I think, 5 months now. I'm not sure Microsoft's really going to do anything about it. They said they're taking a look at it, but we'll see what happens there. And also, when they release 22H2, there are some issues around provisioning when you do the upgrade. This one's been around basically since this released last year. So I'm not sure if anything's really going to happen there, but we've been carrying it forward for quite a few months now as well. So be aware of those. Windows 10, another massive release, 99 vulnerabilities, quite a few this month as well, way above their normal average in what's being updated. Same CVEs that were addressed in Windows 11 show up here for Windows 10. And of course, be aware there, although we call out Windows 10 as the update, the associated servers all the way from 2016 through 2022 are also impacted by these updates because they're running the same operating system kernel. Nothing really new on the known issue side. Same thing that we've talked about for quite a long time. The issue with the cluster network driver not starting up upon the update. It will spin up eventually, but you can go in and manually start it faster if you need to. Be aware that that's happening on the 2019 series of releases that are listed here. We also have this same issue. Interestingly, this wasn't called out in the release notes when I looked at what they generally put up every month. But if you actually go in and look at the individual KB article for Server 2022, this issue with running Server 2022 on the ESXi version of VMware is still there. So it doesn't look like this has been resolved just yet. This one's been carried forward, I think, 3 months now. So we've seen this for a while. Hopefully they'll get this resolved soon. Other than that, nothing new as far as known issues coming out there. We did see the Server 2012 updates, of course. Again, another large number of vulnerabilities in the monthly rollup version of just the base version of Server 2012. There were 69 vulnerabilities addressed. Chris did comment on the fact that Microsoft is starting the notification of the end of support process. I copied their little quote that they had in the KB article here. They said that starting with this release, Microsoft will log events logs beginning July 11th and ending on October 10th. So basically, in your logs, you're going to start seeing notifications that end of support is coming. So be aware of that one. I'm sure they'll ratchet this up over time. We'll probably start to see some pop-ups and some things like that. But for right now, they're just putting some entries into the log files. In addition to the monthly roll-up, we do get the regular security-only update as well. Same number of 69 vulnerabilities. Just a note that these cumulative and security-only updates do include the IE update that Chris talked about earlier. So this is the IE 11 update for those particular operating systems. These are included in both of these updates for Server 2012. We also have the monthly rollup for Server 2012 R2, which is the updated version of the server, obviously. Fixed the 71 vulnerabilities, so 2 additional ones. Again, the same logging issue. Note that Microsoft did end Windows 8.1 back in January of this year, so they're only supporting the server anymore. And of course, we have the security-only update associated with Server 2012 R2 as well. Again, as I mentioned every month, the security-only updates include just those vulnerabilities that were fixed this month. It's basically a lighter update. So if you only want to apply the fixes that have changed each month, you can go through and do the security-only updates. You just want to make sure that you don't miss any months. Otherwise, you have to go back and do the full monthly roll-up. We did see updates for SharePoint Server, again, rated critical as well this month because of the CVEs that were included here. 5 different vulnerabilities. They did update Server 2016, Server 2019, and the SharePoint Server Subscription Edition, which they seem to be carrying forward as well with the latest updates. So be aware of those. Again, 5 vulnerabilities addressed this month. None of these were known, exploited, or publicly disclosed, so nothing highlighted in red this time. I did talk about the Internet Explorer update, and Chris touched on it as well. Just the one CVE that was addressed in here, which is known exploited. So be aware of that one. Chris talked about that a little bit earlier. We also got an important update for Microsoft Office apps, the click-to-run versions. Interestingly enough, the 2 0-day vulnerabilities that were talked about are included in here, but Microsoft still only rates it as important. We've kept the rating on there as well, but you might want to pay careful attention to this one this month as well. Interestingly enough, you'll notice here that there's an Office 2013 click-to-run update. We haven't seen one of those in quite a while. So if you're running some of this really older stuff, there was an update for that this month, in addition to the usual 365 apps, the Office 2019, and the Office Long-Term Service Channel 2021. Again, these are all the click-to-run online updated versions. If you're running traditional Office, we also saw the same updates. 1 fewer vulnerability than the click-to-run versions. There were just 10 vulnerabilities addressed this month, but those 2 same 0 days, and the known exploited ones were included in these updates. A large update across the board. You'll see Excel in here, Outlook, and Word were also individually updated, as well as the Office suites, of course. So quite a few updates this month, mainly in terms of vulnerabilities addressed. We didn't see any .NET releases on the .NET Framework side or any SQL Server or anything like that, but the traditional operating systems, of course, and then the Office apps as well were all updated. With that, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you for a quick wrap up between the Patch Tuesdays.
All right. Thanks, Todd. All right. So for those of you who might be new to the series in general, we also, most software companies are on a continuous update model. So even Microsoft, although they try to do like a cadence where like securities come out on Patch Tuesday, then they talk about their previews towards the end of the month. But most vendors, it's a continuous stream. So this is covering all of the things that happen between the Patch Tuesdays. Google Chrome, Firefox, Firefox ESR, Foxit Phantom PDF, Node.js, multiple branches there, and Thunderbird all had releases with security vulnerabilities confirmed resolved in them. There's this next group here, security updates without CVEs. So with the way that most third-party applications work, you've got, if your latest version could have CVEs resolved in it, the version before it could have had resolved CVEs in it. Any point in that chain, you could have resolved CVEs. Now, machines across your environment could be at different versions. Unless you're using a patching solution to keep up with the third-party apps, the biggest thing there is like use the more paranoid approach of knowing what version everything is at and just trying to keep it up to the latest wherever possible. So security updates without CVEs, these are all ones that tend to have CVEs at some point, multiple times in their update history. We're just letting you know that updates did come out for these. The latest update specifically didn't have a CVE in it, but the one before it could have had. So it's more of the defense in depth approach. And then the non-securities, these are oftentimes specific like feature release type updates. So Google Chrome, 3 vulnerabilities resolved in the release that they did there. Firefox had 13, Phantom PDF, 4 CVEs resolved there. Firefox ESR had 13 and 5. There were 2 different releases there, the 102 and then the 115 release. So depending on where you're at, you're getting up to that 115.0 release gets you to the most clean state. And then Thunderbird had a release fixing 5 CVEs there. So those are some additional third parties that you may want to be aware of. Node.js, again, they've got multiple branches. So if you're on the aggressive branch or current branch, that's your 20.3.1, resolve 10 vulnerabilities there. The lower and upper branches, depending on which branch you might be there, 5 CVEs were resolved in both, but basically you get the version information that you want to get up to and how many CVEs and which ones were resolved. Apple did have multiple releases as well. Some of these were Apple specific, others were third parties. This is not the rapid response. This is just regular Apple updates. So security updates with CVEs, Google Chrome, Firefox, Firefox ESR, macOS Big Sur, Monterey, Ventura, Safari, Microsoft Edge, and Thunderbird all had releases with CVEs tied to them in the month since the June Patch Tuesday. So that is kind of the awareness there to make sure that you've got all of your latest versions resolved there. You can see most of these resolved 1 CVE, a couple of them with 2 CVEs there on the Apple side. Chrome for Mac had 3 resolved, Firefox 13, Edge 3. That's the Edge Chromium for Mac. So that and Chrome, typically they're going to be the same counts, but basically it's a Chrome frame. So most of the vulnerabilities are specifically from Chrome getting updated. Firefox ESR, 5 vulnerabilities resolved there, and Thunderbird with 5 vulnerabilities resolved there. So those are the additional updates you're going to want to make sure that you've kept everything as up to date as possible. Those of you who need to jump for the next, go ahead and do so whenever you need to. We've got some additional questions here that we're going to go through. Again, just to note in your tray of goodies today, you've got the PDF, which has all of the content we covered with URLs. Grab that before you log off so you have fastest access to that. But don't fear, we will be sending a follow-up email that will also give you access to the additional content for this. The Patch Tuesday landing page on Ivanti.com. So if you go to Ivanti.com, there were a couple of questions from people about where to go to get the good stuff. So Ivanti.com, go to resources. Actually, let me go and put this over on my screen and share it again. And that way you guys can see what I'm doing here. Give me a second to share my screen out again. There we go. All right. So if you're on Ivanti.com and you go to resources, there is this Patch Tuesday landing page. Underneath there, this is where you would have gone to register for the series, but you get updates for all of the different Patch Tuesday events that happen. Infographic and blog are live right now. The presentation and webinar, Jenna, who is supporting our group here as well from the production side, she will be getting the recording as soon as it's available and getting those assets updated on here later today. But you can get the PDF version of that presentation right now in that sys tray before you leave the On24 platform. So those will be coming. If you did miss something or missed some of the starting point or needed to go back and reference something, that webinar recording will be available here later today. All right.
Hey, Chris, I got something to comment on
Todd.
real quick. Yeah,
I was going to say,
some
go ahead.
questions. Yeah, there were some questions around 36884 and is Microsoft 365 apps impacted by it? It's kind of interesting. If you look under the CVE information itself, it does list all the click-to-run apps except for Office 365, and it does not explicitly say anything about it in the notes section or anywhere. So the answer is, I don't know. You would think that all the click-to-run type applications would be impacted by this. I don't know why they didn't include O365 in there, but I have not seen that O365 is safe. So I would kind of assume that possibly it is impacted by this and they just didn't list it, but I don't know for sure. I haven't seen it anywhere. Yeah,
so there were a couple of questions about the two Office updates. The one that's not actually in a patch yet, that's mitigation only. Yep, that one looks like it's affecting the specific Office versions, but not the click-to-run. Right?
No, 2019.
I'm not seeing
the 2019 long-term service channel version is click to run right there. The one you're looking at.
Oh, that one is it?
Yep. Okay. That's click to run, and some of the other ones are. The other one is as well.
Yeah.
So
let's put it this way: for the CVE 36884, the one that has the manual mitigations, when you put that mitigation in place. And this is one where we had a couple of questions about this as well. But basically, you're putting a rule in place to say any of these executables that run, doesn't matter, if this executable runs, block any child processes from being spawned. So one question I had from somebody in chat that I didn't respond verbally here, but I'll give it the same answer here is let's say that you launch Excel and you've got a plugin that may launch a child process by whatever activity it does. That should be coming from excel.exe and it should be blocked. Likewise, an Excel file that does some type of macro or maybe malicious payload that's trying to launch a child process. That's again coming from excel.exe. So in both of those cases, that behavior should be stopped by putting this rule in place. Now the other Office, let's see which one is the other. There's too many of them this month. That's the one we just talked about. Security. All right, I'm getting lost in all of my links here. This one should be it. So this is the Outlook security feature bypass. This one is in the patch this month. So that's got your Microsoft 365 apps, Office LTSC, apps for enterprise, Outlook. Yeah. Yep. So this one, if it affects it, your click to runs should get updated for that. And it does have, several of the click to run versions got updated here for that.
Yep.
Cool. I think we're covered on that one. Just so everybody gets this answer, October 2012 is getting its final update in the October Patch Tuesday. The day after that, then it's in ESU mode. So if you are continuing 2012 support after the October Patch Tuesday, then you need to subscribe to Microsoft's ESU service. And if you're using Ivanti's products as well, we have the ability to extend support for EPM, security controls, and Neurons, the cloud patch solution. So you would basically need to contact us to subscribe to our content stream for that as well. So if you're running 2012 past that, make sure to get that in place. Todd, Office 2013 or Outlook 2013, still getting updates? It appears it is yet. That one hasn't end of life yet, right?
Nope. Yep. 2013 and 2016 are still getting updates. Yep.
Perfect. Yep. So Jason, there's the answer for that one. Yeah. So Adrian asks a good question here. With so many 0 days this month, would you advise to expedite patching? I would say that in general, we need to get more aggressive. So surprisingly, again, I think I said this last month too, or it was maybe the month before, but Apple surprisingly has shifted over to taking the most aggressive approach to 0 day response in the industry right now with their rapid security response. Surprising, given that they've been the whole security by obscurity. We're just not going to talk about it, and then we'll get it out, and then we'll talk about it weeks after, and finally acknowledge it. That's the type of mentality that in general we're recommending. So Adrian, I would say that yes, if at all possible, for your end user systems, doing the OS and Office updates sooner than your normal schedule would be ideal. You need to try to shrink that window of how long it takes to resolve known exploited vulnerabilities. So this is, we talked about this many times as well, depending on if you've been on the series for a while, but it's adapting that risk-based mindset. If there is confirmed exploits, your organization should be looking at how do you get to a more aggressive response when it comes to something like that. And then, for regular maintenance, go back into regular maintenance mode for everything else. So my recommendation is, yes, you should be trying to get the OS and Office updates this month pushed as soon as possible. That doesn't mean bypass all testing and throw caution to the wind. Obviously, that can have operational impacts. So each organization has to judge where that balancing point is for them. But our guidance is, wherever possible, try to accelerate when there's known 0 days, especially as many as we're seeing this month. That would be the best guidance I can give on that one. Bob was asking about some SSD performance issues with the Microsoft updates. We didn't specifically talk about that, but it looks like there's been some Windows 11 updates that are impacting SSD speeds. There, a lot of times the hardware-related impacts on this are edge case vendor specific, so we don't often go into those, Bob, unless they impact a very large part of the market, like multiple vendors being affected. Todd, I don't know if you've come across those specifically. I haven't dug into it too much. I just knew that there was some conversations around that.
I haven't seen a lot about it. Yeah, sorry, I can't add much there.
So if there is anybody who is seeing that, there are some conversations around. Looks like Bob pulled a link off of Windows Latest. The way On24 works, I can't just grab that link and share it. But that is something that, let's see if I can find that article. Obviously, it's been coming up because it auto-completed that quite a bit for me. And looks like several locations are talking about it, including Windows Latest. So if you are seeing some impacts around that, looks like the May update is where that kind of started, the most recent conversations around it, but it's been ongoing here. It looks like July has some recent posts as well from Windows Latest. Tom's Hardware looks like it's back as far as May. So if you are seeing performance issues there, take a look at that and see if it's related there. All right, let's see. Any other questions that look like they need addressing to the broader audience, Todd?
No, I think I'm looking through the list here. I think we got most of them. Yep, I think we got them covered.
Okay. All right. On that note, everyone, thank you for joining us again. Grab your PDF download before you leave if you want to grab some of those URLs or any of that additional information. And again, if you do need, I know this was a very overloaded month here. The recording will be coming as soon as we can get that posted later today. So that Patch Tuesday page is where you'll be able to get that, but there should be a follow-up email once that's posted and ready to go. So thank you for joining us this month, and we will see you in August. Enjoy your summer.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That is a wrap for this month. As always, you should definitely subscribe and make sure that you're getting the latest information from us. We're going to do not just the monthly updates, but we'll also be streaming other things like the top questions asked and other great tidbits of information that you're going to want all throughout. So definitely subscribe to our feed, and we'll see you here again next month.
We look forward to seeing you soon.